Behind the Line, episode 24. I'm your host, KC. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. I'm not a real big fan of rules. I understand the reasoning behind the creation of some rules. I'm just not a big fan of people telling me what to do in general. For instance, I think speed limits on interstates are ridiculous. I think it's even more ridiculous when a cop pulls you over on the interstate for something like speeding. What's more dangerous, me driving 80 to 85 miles an hour or a cop getting out of his vehicle, walking on the side of the road with cars going by him at 85 miles an hour? Yet, I understand why a speed limit is in place, even though I don't agree with it. Rules can be a good thing if they're well thought out, clearly written, understandable, and more importantly, enforced. If a rule's not enforced, it's useless. But they have to be understood by the people that are enforcing them. Over the offseason, the NFL hastily created a new rule that allowed coaches to challenge pass interference calls. The new rule came about when the Saints were screwed out of the Super Bowl by a blatant pass interference call that was missed in the NFC Championship game. But here's the problem. When the rule was created, there was no clear direction given to officials on when to overturn and when to allow the call on the field to stand. Overturning judgment calls can be very tricky, especially in slow motion. The league has pretty much rushed the new rule into place, and they've allowed the officials to set the precedent. If you've watched the NFL this season, you know exactly what precedent has been set. Of the 33 pass interference calls that have been challenged by coaches, the coaches have lost 32. Only one call has been overturned. Even obvious calls, like what happened in Sunday's game in Baltimore when Ravens defender Marion Humphrey tackled Texans wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins in the end zone, wiping away a touchdown, wasn't overturned. Bill O'Brien challenged the call. It was obvious that it was pass interference. He interfered with him to save the touchdown. Officials didn't overturn the call. So the precedent has been set. Even if pass interference is blatant on replay, NFL officials aren't going to overturn the call on the field. Why? I have no idea. Perhaps they don't like their judgment being questioned. I really don't know. There's nothing that can be done about this season. With 2/3 of the season out of the way, they can't all of a sudden change the way they approach challenges on pass interference calls. At this point, all it would do is open them up to criticism. So what's even the point of this new rule if it isn't being enforced? It's meaningless. At this point, coaches shouldn't even challenge pass interference calls because it's a waste of a challenge and a timeout. I don't understand why this is so difficult for the NFL to get right. It seems pretty simple to me. If someone is obviously interfered with on a passing play and no flag is thrown and it's challenged, you overturn the call. If it's too close to determine, let the call stand. What's going to end up happening, we're going to get into the playoffs where increased eyes are on each game because there's only one game going on at a time. And a controversial call is going to take place. A call that will impact the end result of the game, just like what happened in New Orleans last year. What are the officials going to do then? Go against an entire season's worth of precedents? Or continue to go along with what they've been doing all year? I don't know the answer. But it seems to me that the officials are afraid to overturn these pass interference calls. We can speculate all day long whether or not Roger Goodell has told them not to change the call on the field. Honestly, it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case. I've long believed that Goodell has had a strong hatred for Sean Payton and the Saints. Ever since the whole Bountygate thing where he handed down that ridiculous suspension for 1 year, I've always felt like he's had it out for Sean Payton. But Roger Goodell was backed into a corner after that NFC Championship game. He had to do something. The outrage across the country was at an all-time high. Sean Payton was the leader in pushing for this rule to be made for this season. Maybe this is Roger Goodell's way of thumbing his nose at the NFL public and Sean Payton and saying he's going to do what he wants to do. I don't know. That's just a theory and speculation on my part. But there's got to be some reason that these obvious pass interference calls are not being changed on the field. All right, Dak Prescott is receiving a lot of praise lately. He's having a career year. Not going to take that away from him. Last 2 weeks, he's thrown for 400-plus yards in each game, being mentioned as a legitimate candidate in the MVP race. The Dallas offense is supposedly one of the best in the league, statistically anyway. All of that will come crashing down the last 6 weeks of this season, and it starts Sunday in Foxborough. Don't buy into the media hype surrounding Dak Prescott right now. The Cowboys are going to go as far as Ezekiel Elliott can take them. I get tired of repeating myself on this point, but Dak is not a franchise quarterback. He isn't the guy that can lead this team to the Super Bowl. I talked about this on Tuesday. The Cowboys have yet to beat a team this season with a winning record. Their best win was against Philadelphia, who's sitting at 5-5. The glaring issue right now in Dallas is the decline of Zeke. Production-wise anyway. Like I said, this team's only going to go as far as he can carry them. If you don't believe me, check this out. In 3 of the Cowboys' 4 losses, Zeke has rushed for less than 50 yards in each game. Shut down by New Orleans. Shut down by Green Bay and Minnesota. Just like I said before the season began, you take away Zeke and make the Dallas offense one-dimensional and put the game on Dak's shoulders to win, the Cowboys lose. Cowboys fans are so excited about this offense. Dak is finally coming into his own. We have the number 1 passing attack in the league. It's fool's gold. These stats are very misleading. Many of Dak's passing yards are the result of the Cowboys playing from behind. He had 441 yards against Green Bay. They were down 24-3 at halftime. 393 yards against the Vikings. They were down 14 early in that game. Same with the Jets. Nearly 300 passing yards, down 21-6 at the half. When Dallas gets behind, they completely abandon the running game. Zeke's touches were down in 3 of their 4 losses. It's not a recipe for success. And now this Cowboys team travels to New England to face the best defensive coach in the NFL, Bill Belichick. The Patriots have been the best passing defense in the league all year. What do you think Belichick's game plan is going to be? He's going to contain Zeke and make Dak try and beat them through the air. And he knows it's not going to happen. He knows what I know and what you know if you've been listening to this podcast. Stop Zeke, stop Dak. Prescott struggles to beat winning teams. He's 10-15 against teams with winning records. Since 2017, he's 5-12. Next 3 weeks, he's going against 3 of the best defenses in the league: Patriots, Bills, and Bears. Follow that up with the Rams and the Eagles. And you want me to believe the Cowboys are going to make the playoffs and Dak's going to be MVP of the league? A month from now, what we will be talking about is the collapse in Dallas. The Cowboys will be 1-4 over the next 5 weeks, 2-3 at best, if they can somehow win at home against Buffalo. I don't see that happening. All right, let's move on to the NBA. I'm starting to wonder if it was a mistake by Pelicans general manager David Griffin to draft Zion Williamson instead of Ja Morant. Morant's absolutely balling right now. Strong candidate for Rookie of the Year, even though Memphis is sitting at 5-9. New Orleans has underachieved this season. There's no doubt about it. Part of it's due to injuries, which is extremely aggravating since they supposedly upgraded their medical and training staff this offseason. Every year, this team struggles with injury. The other night, 9 players were out. I also blame part of it on coaching. For as good as Alvin Gentry is offensively, he is god-awful getting his team to play defense. He's terrible with in-game adjustments. If this team doesn't make the playoffs this season, Gentry's got to go. But I'm really starting to wonder how this season would be going if the Pelicans had drafted Morant instead of Zion. Imagine Morant playing alongside Brandon Ingram and Drew Holiday. He's an upgrade over Lonzo Ball, because not only can Morant create shots for others, he can create for himself, and he's a proficient scorer. But KC, it's not fair. Zion hasn't even played a game yet, so you can't make the comparison. That's my point. You want to talk about load management? Zion is a perfect candidate for load management. More than likely, we're not going to see him until January. The guy hasn't even dribbled a basketball in an NBA game yet. I'm really concerned about the long-term prospects of Zion Williamson's career. He had that freakish foot injury last year at Duke. College basketball is a short season. The NBA season's a grind. The way Zion's built, I'm not sure how long he's going to last in this league, which is the main reason why I'm wondering if the Pelicans made a mistake. But there's another reason too. The NBA is no longer a big man's game. This is a guard-driven league. Nowadays, your bigs are expected to be proficient three-point shooters. Gone are the days of guys like Dwight Howard, who might be the perfect example of what I'm talking about. Dwight Howard's first 7 to 8 years in the NBA were phenomenal. He was almost always healthy. He was a dominant force in the paint, but he never developed an outside game. But at the time, he didn't need it. He was so athletic and strong in the paint that he could score 30 points a night off layups and dunks. Everything was fine for Dwight Howard until he suffered a back injury in his last season in Orlando. And he's never been the same player. That's my main concern with Zion Williamson. Not only do I think he isn't capable of playing a full 82-game schedule, but with his body type, if he suffers an injury to his knees or his back, he is fucked. I have a feeling we're going to look back on the 2019 draft in a few years, and we'll say that the Pelicans made a monumental mistake drafting Zion over Ja Morant. I really hope I'm wrong. But in a league where guards are your premier players, it seems to me David Griffin and the Pelicans whiffed on their good fortunes with the number 1 pick. All right, one of the guys in the NBA that I admire most is Mark Cuban. I watch Shark Tank every week, a show which was struggling during its first season without Cuban. They bring him on in season 2, huge ratings. Seems like just about everything that Mark Cuban touches turns to gold. Brilliant dude. Someone that really inspires me. Unlike the Pelicans, who have a somewhat negative history of drafting players, Cuban and Dallas are just the opposite. He selected a little-known big man named Dirk Nowitzki back in the late 90s. One of the first big men who was a prolific three-point shooter. And now, in the post-Dirk era, a new superstar is born. Luka Doncic is well on his way to becoming the best player in the NBA. What he did Wednesday night against Golden State was nothing short of incredible. A 30-point triple-double in just over 25 minutes of playing time. Only player in NBA history to accomplish that. He's close to averaging a triple-double for the season. He can score from anywhere on the floor, great at creating shots for his teammates, getting them involved, and he makes everything look so easy. The problem with the Mavericks is outside of Doncic and Porzingis, they really don't have anything else. Their role players are not keeping their opponents awake at night. What they really lack is a great wing defender. Who on this roster is going to guard Kawhi Leonard or LeBron James? It's going to be a fun regular season for fans in Dallas, and the Mavs should be a bottom seed playoff team, somewhere between number 5 and number 8. But once we get into the playoffs, where teams will exploit your weaknesses, I think this team is going to get exposed. Porzingis is a great rim defender. At 7'3", it's hard not to be great defending around the rim. But this roster is going to struggle defending against elite wing players. They match up with a team like Houston, they could win that series. But they're not beating either LA team in a 7-game series. I still think Dallas is 1 to 2 years away from being an elite level team in the Western Conference. But unfortunately for Mark Cuban, it's a weak free agent market in the summer of 2020. All right, I saw a 2020 mock NFL draft earlier today. It was done by CBS. Number 1 pick was Joe Burrow out of LSU. Not really surprised with that. I was, though, shocked with the draft placement of Tua Tagovaiola. Due to his injuries, CBS dropped Tua all the way down to the 31st pick in the first round, being drafted by Bill Belichick in New England. If I'm Tua, that would be a great place to start your NFL career. Who knows if Tom Brady comes back next season? He seems to be leaning towards retirement, but we don't know. It's a win-win, though, for Tua. If Brady returns, he spends 1 season learning under the best quarterback to ever play the game. If he retires, he starts his rookie season under the best head coach and franchise in the NFL. I just don't see Tua dropping that far down in the draft. There are so many teams in the NFL in need of a quarterback right now. The Bengals, Dolphins, Tampa. Unless Jameis Winston completely turns it around over the next 6 weeks, I see Tampa moving on from him. Denver, potentially, could need a quarterback. The Chargers. It's becoming evident that Phillip Rivers' days are numbered. He's slow. He's immobile. This team should have been a playoff team this season, and they're hovering near the bottom of the AFC. Carolina needs a quarterback. That's 5 teams off the top of my head. You could make an argument for Buffalo. Josh Allen isn't exactly lighting the league on fire. Tennessee could be interested in drafting a quarterback if the Ryan Tannehill experiment doesn't work out. Jacksonville. We'll see how Nick Foles closes out the season, but his first year in Jacksonville can only be viewed as a disappointment. My point is, there are just too many teams in desperate need of a quarterback for Tua to drop to the bottom of the first round. I'm still of the belief that he's not going to be a great NFL quarterback. But you never know. The draft is a crapshoot. Every year, guys get drafted with all of this hype surrounding them, that they're going to be a superstar in this league, and they're a bust. Others come in with zero fanfare, and they end up becoming Tom Brady and Drew Brees. I think both Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert will get drafted ahead of Tua. In my opinion, Burrow is the best player of the 2020 draft class. The thing that concerns me about Tua is he's never really had to struggle at Alabama. How many close games has he been in? How many times has he had to lead a fourth quarter comeback? Win the game on the final drive? I can't think of any. That's a big deal. Once you get to the NFL level, almost every game you play in will be close. All right, let's get to the college football bets for Saturday. Another god-awful weekend of college football. I'll be honest, it was difficult to pick any games to bet. Outside of Penn State, Ohio State, there's nothing Saturday that even slightly interests me. Thank God we have the NFL, because I'll be honest, college football is becoming painful to watch. So, only 2 games up for this weekend in college football. All right, first game, Penn State at Ohio State. Current line, Ohio State minus 18. Penn State's had a brutal stretch of games to close out the season. They've also struggled against the spread this season, 3-5 against the number of the last 8 games. However, their 3 covers have come on the road. Ohio State has breezed through their easy schedule. Best win of the season was against number 17 Cincinnati, and that was back in early September. The Buckeyes haven't been in a close game all year, and they've got their annual rivalry game at Michigan coming up next week. Classic spot for a look-ahead game for Ohio State. I know Penn State's been struggling. They were outgained by almost 100 yards at home last week against Indiana. But this is just too many points in my opinion. And these two teams usually play each other close. Game was decided by 1 point last year, 11 in 2017, and 3 points in 2016. Penn State is fighting for their playoff lives. Not likely they're going to make it. But I can't see them going into Columbus and winning. I like the Buckeyes to win, but 18 is just way too many points for them to cover. Taking Penn State plus 18. All right, Michigan at Indiana. Current line, Michigan minus 9.5. The Wolverines are on a roll offensively right now. Demolished Notre Dame a few weeks ago. Followed that win by blowing out Maryland and Michigan State. Michigan is balanced offensively. They beat the Irish by rushing for over 300 yards. Against Michigan State's stout run defense, the Wolverines run through the passing game. Indiana has one of the better pass defenses in the Big Ten, allowing only 176 yards a game through the air. I feel like Michigan's going to be run heavy tomorrow, chewing up a lot of the clock. Indiana receiver Whop Philyor is the type of versatile receiver that has given the Michigan defense problems in the past. He's able to dominate the middle of the field, especially against slower linebackers. But the problem is he's in concussion protocol and questionable to play. Even so, this feels like too many points for me to give up on the road. Indiana's proven that they can score and hang with the best teams in the Big Ten. Like I said, Michigan is going to be run heavy, which means both teams will have less offensive possessions. Last two meetings between these two teams have went into overtime. I like Michigan to win, but Indiana to cover. I'm taking Indiana plus 9.5 at home. All right, that's all for today, guys. I'll be back tomorrow morning with my NFL bets for Sunday. Hit the like and subscribe button. Leave me a comment with your college football picks. Follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. I will see you tomorrow morning.